school board special meeting. It is July the 21st, 2020. I see the chair has just joined us. I'm going to turn it over to her. She was having some technical difficulty, and Miss Bowen is unable to be with us tonight because of a very last minute emergency that just occurred. So thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Blunt. Yeah, I'm having, I just did a live interview, an interview with Zoom on television with no technical problems whatsoever. And now I appear to be having continual internet disruption, which is probably, so you may want to, why don't you go ahead, Ms. Striplin, and take it from here and let me see if I can reconnect on a different device.
I will say that I too am experiencing some technical difficulty. I'm clicking on the agenda for the 21st meeting. I've got it. Never mind. We're good. Okay. So again, special school board meeting and permission to advertise proposed tentative budget tonight. And we'll now obviously call the meeting to order. The Pledge of Allegiance I have first on the agenda. Do we have someone who can lead us? Yes, Superintendent has his flag. He's ready.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
It will be great to get back in the boardroom next week.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. I'm ready to be back in person with you guys. So that brings us to 2.01 changes and additions with Ms. Bowen absent tonight. Mr. Jones, is there a chance you could read the changes and additions? Could you?
Yes, colleagues, the changes and additions for today's meeting. First, item 5.01, proposed tentative budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. Additional information was added to this agenda item, including the millage rates. Item 2, add item 3.02 that was pulled. And finally, item 3, add item 4.01, reopen Leon schools updates. And those are our changes and additions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Motion to approve in a second.
Move approval.
Second.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Changes and additions are accepted into the record. Number 3, items for consideration. Proposed 3.01 is proposed tentative budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. I would assume either Ms. Banks or Superintendent is going to present on this item.
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Banks has just joined us along with Ms. Coughlin, so they'll be presenting the tentative budget proposed to move forward.
Okay, there she is.
Good evening. Also, I'd like to add that Ms. Sanders is also going to be presenting on the budget tonight as well. So we're coming to before you tonight to request to advertise a public hearing next Tuesday to discuss the tentative budget. Again, as we discussed last week, this is the beginning of our trim process. So we're going to go through the budget at a high level tonight. We're going to give the board a week to look through the budget. If you have questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us throughout the week, and then we're going to be discussing the budget in detail at the public hearing next week. In the packet that was provided, on page 1 is the agenda for tonight. The taxing authority is the School Board of Leon County, Florida, and the millage rate to be levied at 5.963 is more than the rollback rate of 5.917 by 0.79%. So again, the rollback rate is the millage rate that would need to be levied this year to bring in the same amount of revenue as last year. At the very bottom of page 1, the items in bold, once we finish moving through the packet and go through basically the overview of all the funds, we'll need everything in bold to be read into the minutes. If you turn to page 2 is the resolution that we need to turn into the Department of Education. And it basically shows the certified tax roll, the different millage to be levied, and the amount to be raised. So if you look down towards the middle of the page, number 1 is the district school tax, which is the required local effort. Again, we have to levy this amount in order to participate in receiving state funds. So the certified tax roll is on the far left. It's just over 20.1 billion. The required local effort this year is 3.715 mils, and the amount to be raised is almost 72 million. Below that is the school discretionary millage at 0.748 mils. That's the maximum that can be levied, same as last year. The amount to be raised is almost 14.5 million. If you turn the page, on the back is our capital outlay millage. It's always 1.5, the max that we can levy, and the amount to be raised is 29 million. On the next page, page 4, you'll see a comparison of the millage from last year compared to this year. As you can see, the millage has decreased by 0.204 mils. The big difference, again, is the required local effort. You can see that the required local effort last year was 3.919 mils, and this year it's 3.715 mils. Again, the operating discretionary millage and the capital outlay millage has remained the same. At the bottom of the page, you can see the tax roll data. So the tax roll has increased significantly since last year. It's increased by over 6%, as we said earlier, by 1.1 billion. So last year, the tax roll was just over 19 billion, and this year it's at almost 20.2 billion. It's at 20.18 billion. The next page shows the rollback rate. Again, the rollback rate is the rate that we would need to levy this year to bring in the same amount of revenue as last year. But because even though we're levying a lower millage than last year, because the tax roll has increased, we're bringing in more revenue, we have to advertise a revenue increase. If you turn to the next page is just the legal advertisement requirements on page 6, but on page 7 is the beginning of the ad that will actually be in Saturday's paper. It shows that last year the actual property tax levy was about 117 million. This year the proposed tax levy is going to be 120.4 million. And again, that is required in order to receive 132.1 million in state funds. Below that, we're required to say that the required local effort has decreased by 1.19% and represents 0.6 of the total taxes being proposed. At the very bottom of the page, you can see that we've noticed that next week we will be in person. Page 8 is the capital outlay portion of the notice. Shows in the middle of the ad the 29 million that we expect to receive, and it goes through the list of everything that these funds could be spent on. Page 9, you get a snapshot of the entire budget. In a second, I'll hand it over to Ms. Coughlin. She's going to go through our general fund budget, and then Ms. Sanders is going to go through our special revenue, debt service, and capital projects budgets. The total budget for the district is over 515 million. And at the top of the page, again, you can see the total millage to be levied is the 5.963 mils. And if you give me 1 second, I will hand it over to Ms. Coughlin. We are short on mics over here, so we're having to share a device. Just give me 1 quick second.
It's taking us time to get here.
I know.
All right, so I need to unmute.
down.
You can hear me? Okay. Hello. If you look at the next page, page 10, it's a page you've seen every year. This is comparing this year's, when I say this year, 2019, 2020's unofficial actual revenue to the next year's revenue 2021. I'd like to just point out the significant changes, and that would be we're not getting the best and brightest this year. We're getting the teacher salary increases. So that's about a 5 point. Where is it? It's in there somewhere. 5.313. Okay. So that's the difference there. Also,
Naomi, where is the addition for, I see best and brightest reduction. I don't see the additional.
that's what I'm looking for myself.
Okay.
I think I may have rolled it up into another categorical, but I'll fix this before next week. I apologize. I'll add that into that. I swear it was there, but that is a different, we'll raise it by 5.5 million, 5.6 million that will be used for teacher salary increases. You can see that in the mental health assistance, we're getting a little more money there. That's what they seem to be focusing on, like the mental health and the safe schools. So all the other areas have pretty much remained the same, close by. Another area you're going to see I have not budgeted for yet, and I will continue. That'll be done prior to the final budget, is our preschool and after school programs, because at this point in time, when we get back, it's going to be probably half of what we normally budget because of the social distancing and running the program. So I've got to work more closely with those directors to determine how much we need to set up for those programs for the after school. So that doesn't mean we're not going to have them. It just means that I haven't gotten to the point to work with the directors or the schools to come up with a budget item there, but that'll be added prior to the final budget being presented.
So to clarify, the line where it says total state original estimated 2021, the third column, instead of 175 should be more in the range of 180, 181.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
I apologize. I'll even fix this before we come back next week.
That's okay. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. The other thing, go down to the bottom of the sheet. This is an estimated ending fund balance, and it looks like for when we allocate everything, we finish everything, our ending fund balance is $51 million. Understanding 18 million of that is restricted, tied to categoricals such as instruction materials, technology, those type of programs. It's all restricted dollars. The actual ending number that we reallocate into the next year we use to balance the budget is the 24.9 million. So then if you go to page 11, it's that.
Can you hold up just a minute? Does anybody have a question on that page on 10? Anybody else? All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. And page 11 is where I show where we take and we break out all that revenue and the ending fund balances, and we roll it and we reallocate everything into the next year. So you see the different categories we have here. And once again, the pages behind it show what make up those different categories. The one thing we would like to point out this year, where there were some little increases, more than little, but understand, like you look at the staffing plan, it looks like we're gone down 3 million in the staffing plan. We haven't really, it has decreased, but it's decreased because of students not being in the schools. We've got an increase to charter schools of almost 4 million. So we've got these children, we have a brand new charter school opening this year. So we have some of our students going there. We also have the Tallahassee Math and Science increase their grade level. They increased their numbers of students. So that's about, from right now, about 750 children that will be going either from homeschool, our school, or private school. So that affects our bottom line in the staffing plan. So it's not that we aren't rehiring, it's the fact that we don't have the FTE. So you have to adjust the staffing plan when the students aren't there. The other thing is we are, even though we know we're going to get money through this year, but we do know, or we anticipate a holdback after the legislature. Yeah. Okay. we are anticipate a holdback. We are anticipating a special session later on in the year once they get all the revenues determined and they determine that they're going to have to do a holdback. So right now we're setting aside about $5 million just in case. That way we have a reserve for that. We don't have to go in and make any major cuts unless it goes above that $5 million. If we don't get a cut, then we can use those. We can move forward with the $5 million, and the superintendent and you as the board can decide how it needs to be spent. That is really the most major changes in here in how we allocate the funds. And unless you have any questions, I'm going to pass on to Ms. Sanders. Yay. Yay.
You know, it's tough times at the district office. They get one mic, one camera, right? They have to share it amongst themselves. All in all,
because everything is in the classrooms, Mr. Superintendent.
You got it. You got it. So all in all, though, this is really good news for us. And I know Naomi and Kim and Kathy and the rest of the team has been working really hard. So if you look at what Naomi just presented, with the unrestricted fund balance of still just over $10 million, which is what we drove it down last year. Remember, last year we paid out $4.6 million in teacher bonuses. We were afraid to make it a reoccurring expense. So we drove that number down to 10 million. We still have that 10 million plus where it says miscellaneous budget items, number 10. You see that increase from 2 to 7 million. That's where the other 5 million is as we brace potentially for budget reductions after what may be a special session in the first of the year. That, along with our emergency fund balance of $5 million, gives us about a total of $20 million to brace for any potential reductions, which really financially we're in. I feel good. I feel good overall. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in November, December. Hopefully, if they don't touch that 5 million and they hold us harmless, which I don't see how they're going to do that. But if they did, then that will give us room to negotiate, as we talked about compression and some of the other things that are going to come with that $5 million for the beginning teacher pay. We want to be able to offset that. We want to be able to address that with our teachers, but we just don't know what we don't know, and it would be irresponsible of us to do it now. But it is kind of in a holding place there under miscellaneous, is that $5 million. And if we have it after the first of the year, then by all means, and we need to do right with our teachers and address some of the compression that this other money is going to cause. So all in all, I'm happy and excited about where we ended up at the end of this fiscal year.
Madam Chair, Mr. Superintendent, are the monies that we have for furnishings caught in this budget?
So I'll let Ms. Sanders speak to that. No, we've held all of that money harmless as well, but I'll let Ms. Sanders, she can speak a little bit more to capital outlay.
Okay, thank you.
You're muted, Ms. Sanders.
Got it. Better? Okay, thank you. I'll start on page 14, which is the tentative budget for our federal grants. On the top part, you're going to see a breakdown of the anticipated revenues that we will be awarded by DOE. It includes not only new grants for July 1st, but it also includes projects that might have gotten extended or that had carryover roll forward. This amount does not include the CARES Act, as we have not been awarded it yet, and we weren't sure how it was going to be set up as a fund. We got a little more guidance today, so it will be included for next time. Below it, you'll see a breakdown then of the expenditures by object code. And basically with federal grants, whatever we incur as expenditures is what we would have as revenues. So we would never have a fund balance. So whatever we use is what we're going to get reimbursed for. So we're estimating right now about $44 million for federal grants. On page 15, You'll see our nutrition services budget. The top part again is a breakdown of the revenues and how they come through the state. And then on the bottom is the anticipated expenditures tied to that. We are estimating revenues to be impacted, that we saw a hit this year, and we're estimating even more for next year, unfortunately. So while we're still hoping to end, we're ending this year in the positive, we're really close for next year. So we're going to be watching expenditures and doing the best we can to make sure that we still operate a successful program. On page 16, we have the capital outlay.
Kathy, let me hold on one second. Back to food service. So us being out the last 9 weeks of the school year, and we held all of our employees harmless. That means we didn't furlough any employees. We continue to pay 100% of our folks through the end of June, but we weren't generating that revenue and that reimbursements because our kids weren't in school. So although we fed a lot of kids through the drive-through and everything else, it wasn't nearly what we would have generated had we all been in school in normal session for that last quarter of the school year. The same moving forward with this year. We know if we have a large number of our students who are choosing the digital academy, or if all of our students are at home, heaven forbid, that those numbers, will also completely diminish, as opposed to us being able to keep those reimbursements coming.
Correct. And we're expanding, as we had talked about in previous meetings, elementary schools will all be free. So we're hoping that the participation for the children that are there, that will help us. And then we're also still waiting on a waiver. I believe USDA did get permission to operate for kind of like what we did over summer, where those in Digital Academy could still come pick up meals. We're working through those details still, but hopefully that will be an option for those children as well. But it's hard to predict the participation that we're going to have. So at this point, unfortunately, we're kind of planning for the worst, but hoping for the best with food service. Everybody good?
Okay, yes. No.
Okay, going on then to capital outlay. The top portion, you will see a breakdown by fund. We have numerous funds in capital outlay. So we budget for each of them accordingly. It shows what, again, at the top part, what the revenues would be for each of those funds individually, and then what the expenditures are associated with them. We are estimating, as the advertisement says, that our 1.5 mils is going to be good. We did see a little bit of a hit thus far in our sales tax, and that would be because of just people not being out, people not spending, people not doing what they normally do. So we had we're estimating about a $2.5 million impact for this year. So we just held it harmless for next year, and we're estimating about 19.5 for that. And then most of the expenditures you'll see below, it doesn't include the $1 million for the middle schools and high schools to continue with their furniture, fixtures, and equipment purchases. And we've already gotten some responses, and they're already busy putting in POs for that. So, and then of course, the big projects still that we have finishing up at Rickards and Fairview. Any questions on that?
So again, just to reiterate, for the month of April alone, Kathy, we lost about $500,000.
Correct.
So if our normal sales tax,
we're still waiting on May to come, and then we're waiting on June as well. May we should have shortly in the next week or two. So we'll have a little bit better of a picture then as to how we'll finish the year out.
Right. So in general, you're predicting about a $2 million budget shortfall for this year, and then you just rolled that into next year as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then the last one is the debt service, which is pretty uneventful. Basically, we do transfers from capital outlay to pay for our existing debt service, our bonds and things of that nature. So it's really just the revenue that comes in, and then the payments that we have to make out. And then there is a fund balance that you'll see growing at the end, and that's because we hold the money on one of our COPs, and then when it comes due, we are making the payments to our intermediary, but then when they come due is when we recognize it on our books. So while it looks like we're going to end with $60 million, it's really just going into a holding account to make that final payment when it becomes due. Any questions? All right, thank you all.
Thank you. All right, I believe that brings us to number 5 on that agenda. Is that correct, Ms. McKinney-Williams? Are we finished with the presentation portion?
That is my understanding, Ms. Banks.
Wait. Before we do that, Kim, you got to jump back on and brag about the news you received from the bond raters.
Sorry, and also I'd like to report that we just received additional webcams, so I no longer have to share my device with the entire finance department. But yes, we went through a re-rating exercise related to our our 2014 sales tax bond issuance. It's with Fitch Rating. That's one of the big three credit rating companies like Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch. And so we were a little leery kind of going into it. They told us that they had just re-rated several districts within Florida, and that most of the districts had all been downgraded because of, as a result of the pandemic and just the budget situation and some of the comments that from the governor and state leadership as far as where we were headed with the budget. And so again, we were a little leery, but coming out of it, once we got our rating, they actually held our rating constant. So we're still, our sales tax issuance is still AA rated. So I thought that was excellent news. And they actually commented on our operating and budget policies and procedures. And they said that that was one of the reasons that they held us, they held our rating constant, is because since 2016, our budget reserves have continued to grow, and that they were impressed with our management over our finances. So I thought that was good news to report. So I know that Ms. Coughlin is patting herself on the back.
As well as Superintendent. Yes, Madam Chair.
Thanks. I just wanted to underscore what she just said, because last couple of years, whenever anybody wanted to raid the reserves, I'm like, no, our bond rating is critically tied to this. So I'm happy to see that I was accurate with that and that it paid off for us. And I'm grateful to the superintendent and to all of us for finding ways to fund our priorities without debilitating our bond rating and our reserve fund, which I predict we're going to need. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? All right, so I'm looking for a motion to board grant permission. So item number 5 needs to be read aloud. Do I have a motion from someone?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I move that the board grant permission to advertise all the appropriate notices to include the following tentative millage rates for the fiscal year July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. For local required effort, 3.715. B, for discretionary operating purposes, 0.748. And C, for capital outlay projects, 1.500. Total proposed millage, 5.963. And to set a public hearing on the 2021 tentative budget for Tuesday, July 28th, 2020 at 6 p.m. at the Aquilino Howell Center, 3955 West Pensacola Street, Tallahassee, Florida.
I have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Ms. Wood. Any opposition? Motion carries. All right, so should I now turn the meeting back over to Ms. Rasmussen? Yes, meeting is now turned back over to the chair.
Unmute yourself.
I thought you were doing a fine job, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you.
I do need a little help though, because the only way I was able to get the Zoom to appear was to shut everything else down. So I don't have anything in front of me in terms of the written agenda. So somebody help me.
I can guide you through that if you like. So really honestly, we were just at 3.01, which is the proposed tentative budget. 3.02 has been pulled. So that brings us to 4.01 reports to be heard, which is the Reopen Leon Schools update. And then 5.0 was persons to be heard. So that's about it on the agenda. And then we go into superintendent's comments, continuing concerns, and new concerns.
Thank you, ma'am. So reports.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Wood.
I just want to say that because of Ms. Bowen's departure, I had planned to make a motion tonight, but it's an important motion to me that we have all the board members present. So I will just discuss those in my comments, and perhaps we can look at that for the following board meeting. So I won't be making a motion tonight. I just wanted to tell folks that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wood. I wanted to, this is where the superintendent, I suppose, is going to give us an update on the reopening of the schools. And I wanted to offer a thought that I know you all, thank you, Ms. Triplin, I appreciate that. I know that you all, your email boxes have been as full as mine. And I personally tried to answer as many as I possibly could, hours upon hours, of reading those. And one of those letters that came, it was co-signed by 11 teachers. And this was so helpful to me to reflect, and I'm hoping that I can pull it up on my phone and read. I was just hoping that maybe for a second, for all of the ways in which the community is torn and divided around this issue, to think about the ways in which we are united. And this particular letter starts off by saying this, and I was hoping that this could sort of frame our conversation, and that we, no matter where we land ultimately with when and how we start school, that this is something that we all agree on. And these teachers said, we should note first and foremost that there are things we all agree on. Students being present in the classroom is the most effective and desirable way to learn and teach. School provides student services such as meals, socialization, and access to dedicated teachers and staff to help with developmental needs in a wide range of specialties. That is much of the reason the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a recommendation to support in-person school on June 29th. We know that when students are in the classroom, it allows their parents and caregivers to go to work to provide for their families. We recognize that parents are not set up to teach their kids the subject matter they learn from their teachers in school. Parents have more than they can deal with just to take care of their children's needs when they get home from work. Just as important, we all need for our economy to function as fully as possible to assure that families have access to work and income. Being that we agree on all of these goals, we as teachers take issue with how we accomplish these goals. And they go on to state their position. But I thought if we could get back to the beginning about the things that we do agree on. And I feel as leaders that it is incumbent upon us to do everything we can to instill a sense of confidence, to make sure that our teachers feel valued and protected to the greatest degree possible, that our parents understand that we have empathy and concern for their ability or inability to teach and work from home simultaneously, that we understand and we agree that students are better served in person, face to face, and that while we may disagree at the end of the day on the best way to get there, no one has the right answer to this. This is a global problem that school districts are challenged with all across the world and in our country. And what we have on this call right now, or this Zoom meeting, are some incredibly dedicated people who want to end up in the right place for the right reason. And we are scrapping and scrabbling. I was trying to get there. We are trying desperately because we care so deeply about our kids and our teachers. I know when I think about it's easy to kind of group people together and think about, quote, teachers. But when I think about the teachers that I know, these are the people who helped raise my children. They mean everything to me. This is deeply personal for us to protect our teachers. And I just believe that with a little bit of patience and a little bit more time in reading all those emails and trying to respond, there are more and more ideas. If there is a silver lining here, we have an incredibly talented group of stakeholders who really want what's best for our community. They don't want us to get sick. They want our children to be fed and nurtured and educated. And so I just believe that as leaders of the school system, that we, with a little bit more patience and a little bit more effort, we've got 30 days till the current date of school start. If I've learned anything about this pandemic, it's that every time we make a sound data-driven decision that we all agree on, and okay, here we are, something changes and it's obsolete by tomorrow. It's a minute by minute moving target. And even as the science evolves and we get new information from the experts, and I just hope for us that we can find our commonality in that guiding principle, that we have more in common as a community than we don't. And we all want what's best for everybody. We want our community to be safe and educated and prosperous. And we have to instill that confidence. I think that we need to, I'm going to give one analogy and then I'll be happy to turn it over. And this is an analogy I kind of just came up with, but let's just use driving a car as an example. We all understand that getting into a car and driving into traffic has risks associated with it. That is why we have speed limits, stop signs, traffic signals, police officers, flashing lights, green lights, red lights. Our cars have turn signals and airbags and seat belts. And I think and all of those things mitigate that risk to make us feel relatively safe getting out on the road. Is it completely safe? No. But those are the things that we have put in place as a society to help us reduce the likelihood of a tragedy. Similarly, I believe that if we as a school system can articulate to our teachers and staff and parents where our road signs are, what are the red lights, the yellow lights, the green lights, what are the speed limits, what are the rules of the road for reopening our schools, that we can instill a sense of confidence that we are doing the very best we can, and people can enter or not enter that space based on their very own deeply personal decisions. Teachers that have family members or themselves with underlying health risks, I hope we can find a way to accommodate them in a way that they can teach in the virtual space. But even as recent as an hour ago, I heard an idea from a teacher that was completely new to me. And I thought, that really might work. We've had a ton of great ideas proposed by our task force and a lot of people. Great ideas that may or may not work in a school setting that they don't understand, or that it would not be legally or fiscally feasible. But with us all pulling and rowing in the same direction, I just believe, like I said, with a little bit more time and a little bit more patience, that we can get where we need to be and increase everyone's confidence in our ability to do that safely. Thank you. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well said.
Very well said.
Thank you. You're muted, Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, I know. Ms. Wood, did you have something you wanted to say now, or?
No, I have a lot of things to say, but I'll wait. And I wanted to appreciate Ms. Rasmussen for starting the meeting off on that tone. I think that's very important, that we stay open and listen to all points of view. And, whatever we decide, some people aren't going to be happy because, that's just obvious. So we have to just do the best we can and look out for the health and safety of our kids, our families, and our staff. And there's a lot to discuss about that. I'd like to, hear the report tonight, and then I'm sure we all have comments to make. So I'll try to save mine.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah, Ms. Rasmussen, that was beautiful. I mean, well said. And me following that, I'm kind of intimidated, to be honest with you, but I couldn't have said it any better myself. We're all looking for that silver bullet and that magic, formula to get our kids back in school and going again, while also protecting for all of our staff members. But your analogy to driving out on the highway and to having turn signals and red lights and signs that gives us warning, I think it was a great analogy. I am really excited Last week, I think I felt a little bit defeated. We were kind of all scattered. I've talked to other superintendents across the state. I have another meeting tomorrow with the folks in Okaloosa and Escambia and Bay County, and they're wrestling, and their boards are wrestling with the exact same things that we are. What does the executive order mean? What doesn't it mean? What are our options? What autonomy do we have here in Leon County? And first and foremost, we want to protect our employees, but we also have to protect the resources of our entire school district. And so that is, that's the dilemma, that's the equation. I come to you tonight as we have been wrestling with what is the best way to accommodate the recommendations of the task force and some of the concerns we've heard from parents. That we had this kind of divided system was our initial approach. So we had 18,000 kids that have chosen brick and mortar face-to-face, and 10 to 11,000 kids that have chosen digital learning or at home. And what we were trying to create was, in a lot of other districts were doing the same thing, this kind of two-headed monster, one to serve the face-to-face brick and mortar, and then one to serve solely the digital learning and learning from home. So after thinking about things and talking to some of my other things, and then listening about how can we reduce the number of students who are physically in our classrooms to allow for more social distancing, to change that red light maybe to a yellow light where our teachers feel, oh, thank God, I'm not surrounded by 30 kids with masks. Could we potentially blend those two together while also listening to our parents that the Digital Academy wasn't giving them all the options they wanted? It didn't give them the performing arts and the band and the chorus and the steel drum and the guitar, or the AP chemistry or Latin too, because that wasn't part of the curriculum. That we purchased a huge curriculum package, but that wasn't part of it. And not only could we couldn't give it to them, but neither could Florida Virtual School because they don't have it either. So what could we do to blend those models to be really innovative? And I think we may have the solution. And I'm really excited, as you can tell tonight, about some things I want to share. So what we did was we are now combined forces, and we are scheduling kids all together. Instead of scheduling 2,000 kids or 1,500 kids at Lincoln and brick and mortar and 500 or 600 in digital academies and splitting, we're combining them. Well, that combination allows for less students who are physically in a classroom. So at the secondary level, if you say I have 26 kids in my class, there may be 18 in the class, but 18 are physically there, but 8 have zoomed in and distance learned, right? And so they will be there in real time as teachers. This is my vision. This is my vision. I keep saying this is my vision because I know a lot of it has to be bargained and talked to with our teachers. But then there's only 18 kids in a class. In the secondary level, that reduces significantly the number of kids and allows us to spread out even more. Imagine what it does for elementary school, because elementary school, you can separate and by teacher assign children. We had a principal at one of our Title I schools yesterday when we presented it. She looked at the numbers. She goes, oh my gosh, because we've talked about this before, how we have a large number of our kids in our Title I schools. They're not in a good place and they want to stay at home. But she looked at the numbers and said, oh my gosh, physically there'll only be 8 kids in the class. Imagine how much social distancing can go on in that environment. And our kids in real time will be expected to log on, not that nonsense before, check in, check out. That in real time, we can offer a lot of synchronous class activities. So no matter if you were in class or at home, the school day starts when the school day starts. And I'm really excited about this. I think our administrators are growing to become excited about it. We're going to talk to teachers about it tomorrow. But for us, it solves a lot of the problems about having a class that's full of students and then having a class that's empty. That to me just doesn't make sense. And we're able to afford and offer parents and families the entire array of all of our 600 classes, which is also exciting, and the arts and performing arts and the classes that otherwise they may have been excluded from. So now I think we are rolling forward a plan that continues to evolve, that continues to develop. And that's notwithstanding the argument of 100% in or 100% out, okay? And a friend and mentor of mine gave me, you know how I am, I'm a hard charger. And when it's time to get up and fight for our kids, I'm going to fight. But, Pat Weaver gives me good advice in consult sometimes when she says, Rocky, be still. just be still. Take the time to digest all of the letters from last week, all of the letters from this week, some of the things that are going on around you, what the commissioner is saying and what the ramifications are about a decision or decisions that we make collectively together, and just be still for a minute. But I'm very excited about this plan moving forward. I think it then gives those people at home what they wanted. The teachers are signing, the kids are signing in every day, interacting with their teacher, which is what we also heard. I didn't hear from my teacher. I didn't see from my teacher. So those kids would be in school or in class at the same time that the kids that were physically there in brick and mortar. With that, we were going to have tonight, the Department of Health was going to present some numbers. I had the chief of police that was going to talk a little bit about crime statistics. I was reminded by Ms. McKinney-Williams that this has been on the calendar as a special budget meeting, that the sole purpose of this meeting historically is for simply to present the budget, to advertise the budget. So we wanted to make that go first. I didn't feel as though I could ask the individuals from the early learning coach, because I wanted the Department of Health and Mark O'Brien to report out on what are y'all seeing here in Tallahassee and Leon County. And I wanted the Early Learning Coalition to give us a little information about what a lot of these private providers and daycares they've been running all summer. So what were they seeing with young kids day in and day out? And then what was the chief seeing about juvenile crime and kids, being out and what was going on with them? We're pushing them into the task force meeting Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. I didn't think it was fair to ask them to wait to present tonight. I'm very excited about the model we are rolling out moving forward to merge both the Digital Academy kids and our brick and mortar kids together. That was significantly reduce the number of students. So if we were at a red light with 25 or 26, if we get down, to 16 to 18 kids in our secondary schools, and even fewer in our elementary schools, I think that will go a long way to getting to the social distancing, not to mention what it will do to help our buses, the crowdiness of our buses, and in our cafeterias. So with that, I'm going to let you guys ask questions. I reported out about the numbers in general. About 18,000 want brick and mortar. Between 10 and 11,000 have chosen Digital Academy, and it varies by school. So I'll entertain questions, and I have all the members of my staff that are on here as well.
Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Jones.
Yes. Well, one, I appreciate all that has been said in this meeting thus far, most specifically from our chairperson and also from you. There are some things that I think we need to do a great job in communicating to our varied constituencies of both parents and our teachers. But much of what you describe will help to allay some of the misgivings that have been publicly communicated by one of our single most constituencies, and that is our teachers. So when we talk about that, what we all are been made aware of in terms of social distancing and what creates a safer environment and the necessity of wearing masks, when we talk about driving down the density in our classrooms with more of our parents who are opting for digital academies, and that drives down the density of our classrooms, the density of our buses, then we can talk about what we know is our already ongoing plan to make certain that we mitigate issues for possible infection and contamination by any constituents who would come and be in our physical facilities. But I think we need to do our part. That requires the entire engagement of our entire community. I think we need to be forthright and honest with our parents so that we can all share in the responsibility in creating the safest environment possible. Let us ask our parents, those who can and will, to genuinely think about the option of digital academies so that they can be a part of ensuring that we can drive down density so that more of our parents who have fewer options can take advantage of being able to come into that space and have that space be properly socially distanced, wearing masks. Teachers will feel safer. And then let's also do a better job of communicating to our public what it is we're doing to make certain that we're going to be safe, that we're hiring additional staff to make certain that we're able to flip a classroom or ensure the cleanliness and sanitizing of those spaces. But I think we need to do a better job to mitigate the concerns of our important and integral workforce. And if we ask our parents, those who can and will, to those who may have opted for in-class instruction, those who can bear the brunt of at-home instruction, to do so that we can ensure that we're able to bring down class size. Make this everyone's responsibility, right? Lincoln talked about the angels of our nature. Well, I think we need to look at our neighbors and what our other parents' needs are. No one wants anything to happen to anyone's children. But if we all play a part in driving down density and making the choices for those families that can, I think we can find ourselves in that happy place that you described. But I think we need to speak openly and honestly with our constituents' parents, such that we can mitigate the concerns of our constituents who are our teachers.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Stripling, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone's words tonight have just been beautiful. And I love that about this group. We can all be different, but we are also passionate about what we do and the kids we serve and our teachers and all of our employees. I think Mr. Jones hit it right on the head, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. Please, let's encourage our community. If you are able to sign up for digital, if you have a child that you think is going to succeed in that environment, if that is an option for your household, please consider it. Please consider that. We're encouraging you because, like Daryl said, Tallahassee is a special community. This place comes together like I don't think many communities do. And this is the time to come together. And if your child can learn at home, it's going to decrease the numbers in those classrooms. So I would encourage that. I also love that the notion from superintendent of be quiet and listen. It's like that verse, be still and know I'm here. Be still and listen. And we've been listening. Our community has come out so many strong voices. The parents they want the best for their children, and whether it be they want them to stay home, they're worried about their health, or they want them to socialize again because they know they're sad, they know they're lonely, they know they miss their sports teams. We've had so many parents interested in, can my child play sports again? And that may not be important to some people, but it is absolutely important to a lot of people. Music, don't forget about the arts. And so we have heard you. We've been still and we've been listening. But I also think today there was a lot of angst in our community. There was a lot of, I don't think I've ever gotten so many texts. Are you guys voting tonight? I'm like, no, this is a discussion. We want to listen. We want to listen and hear you. But there was a frenzy, and not knowing causes a lot of panic in our community, and probably in every community. But I would hope that we can try to let our parents in our community know what our plan is. If we're going to meet next Tuesday, exactly what it's for, and we're voting or we're not voting, or and it's hard because everybody knows we can't call each other and discuss what we're going to talk about tonight. So sometimes it unfolds as we're talking about it. Mr. Jones, did you make sure to hit your mute button? Thank you, friend. But I just want to publicly say thank you to all the parents. Where I'm flipping through and seeing all the emails, not the ones that were sent just to us, but the ones that were also sent to persons to be heard, and reading all of the comments. And they're so important and they're so valued. You are being heard, even though you're not in this forum like we normally are, and you're not speaking for your 3 minutes. You are being heard, and we appreciate your comments. I also appreciate superintendent continuing to take this notion of what school looks like in the fall and continuing to allow it to grow. And I love this idea of, so 10 are in the classroom, but the other 10 are at home, but they're still with their classmates. I love that idea. And I think that's brilliant. It's one of those things. Why didn't we think about this before? Well, you know what? There's a lot going on, and everyone here, especially everyone at the district, is doing the best they can. And as we continue to evolve and August 19th grows closer, I just hope that we're offering an option for everyone. We're not excluding anyone in our community from what they want and what they need for their children. We're offering everyone an option, and I could not be prouder of our district for that.
Thank you, Ms. Striplin.
Madam Chair? I feel like I'm going to be the wet blanket on this conversation, but I do appreciate
her. No, just kidding.
Yeah, unmute me. No, I appreciate what everyone said, and we are trying to figure this out together, and it's a very difficult thing to figure out. And I really appreciate the sentiment about letting our parents know how important it is well, first of all, the whole community needs to know that we are under an executive order from the Commissioner of Education, and it reads, it's about to kill me, but it reads, school boards and charter school governing boards must open brick and mortar schools in August at least 5 days per week for all students, subject to the advice and orders of the Florida Health Department. So a lot of people want us to say right now, we're not going to have brick and mortar, and we aren't able to do that because we will have our funding cut off. That's my understanding, correct, Superintendent?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. And if I could add to that, so we were kind of confused by that. So we went across the street and had a conversation with the folks at the Department of Health, and they said, wait a minute, we're not in the recommendation or advice business. We'll give you numbers and data, but we aren't going to give you any recommendations or advice. So I think there's a huge disconnect between the State Department of Health and the State Department of Education.
Yes, there certainly is. And so later, whenever it's appropriate, I will talk about the waiver I'm going to request that we vote on at our next meeting when it's scheduled and agended properly and everyone is here, to ask for a waiver from that order to allow us to make that determination based on home rule. But I'll submit the amendment. I mean, I could read it right now just so people know what I'm going to ask to be agended next week. And it's going to say, in order to protect the health and safety of our students, families, and staff, and acknowledging the autonomy derived from home rule authority granted to school boards by state law, I'm going to ask the school board to ask you to request a waiver from the commissioner that we must require in-person learning. And I say that not to say that we won't, but that we might have the option if things continue on the ground. The other thing I'd like to say about really encouraging our parents to choose a digital option is I want them to consider it if they can. I know what they want for their kids. We all do. We all make decisions based on what's good for our kids. I certainly did with my child. But right now, there's a bigger picture to look at. And the bigger picture is the health and safety of everyone. The CDC has said very clearly that there are some people that are much more at risk for getting ill, seriously ill, from COVID. And I'm just going to read a few. I've got so many pieces of paper here, but I'll try this one. And here's the latest CDC guidelines. It says, people of any age with certain underlying medical conditions such as cancer, obesity, heart conditions, sickle cell disease are at high risk of COVID-19. Those with asthma, high blood pressure, pregnancy, smoking history, and diabetes are also at increased risk. I read that because it's true that parents are going to be able to choose to keep their children at home if they have those risks or their family has those risks. The people right now that are not able to choose that option are the teachers and the staff and the principals. And that is a mighty big thing for those teachers to have to come into the school environment and take that risk and make that choice. So anybody who wants to help the teacher, that is what the teachers are saying. They're scared. And we took I don't know if you're going to give the results of that survey, but I have them here. We all have them. And I did a comparison from what parents chose, which was, and I'm just going to read a few of them. I could read all of them because I have them, versus what teachers said. And you superintendent had all the principals, based on our request last week, to survey their teachers to see if they were scared, or was that the word that you used, if they were concerned about coming back to school to teach in brick and mortar. There was a very, very high percentage, in most cases over 70% of the teachers said that they were concerned. 75% of the elementary principals said that. I don't think parents know this. I don't think parents know, no matter how hard they try, that they're going to be able to do all the things that we want them to do and that we're saying we're going to try to do, like keeping people 6 feet apart and having kids wear masks all the time and do all these things. They're teachers. They know what it's like on the ground floor. They know that when little Johnny has an accident or needs help with blowing his nose or flushing the toilet or, you know, whatever, they'll go in there and they'll help them and they'll get real close and they won't be able to social distance. So I think that's why you're seeing, not that teachers, I mean, some teachers have been accused of like being lazy and wanting to, you know, loaf around their house. It's nothing like that. And parents need to understand that they are scared for good reason. And parents also need to know that we may not be able to, if a lot of kids come back to brick and mortar, we may not be able to keep their kids safe. I mean, I just have to say that because we can't, you know, if 1,500 kids come to Childs, which is what have been requested, how can you possibly keep 1,500 kids apart and socially traced every time they take their mask off and every time they, you know, go sneak around the corner? I mean, I've been with high school kids a long time, and you know, it's hard for them to follow the rules all the time. That's not their age-appropriate behavior. Their age-appropriate behavior is to try to get away from, you know, going by all the rules. So that's why teachers and principals are scared. And there's a real disconnect, and I'll read out a few of them. So I'll just start alphabetically. At Appalachia Elementary School, 51% of the parents wanted brick and mortar. 30% of the teachers said they felt comfortable. At Astoria Park, 47% said that a parent said they wanted to come back, but only 19% of the teachers said they felt comfortable. And we have the data, and I think we should publish it by school. I'm looking at DeSoto Trail, 75% of the parents want their kid to come to brick and mortar, but only 18% of the teachers feel comfortable. Now, this is pretty startling data to me. And I think if people, when they're making their choice, if that's what we have to go with, if we have to follow the commissioner's orders, they need to understand that the density in the classroom, the more kids that come to brick and mortar, the more danger they are putting our teachers and our schools in. And I just have to say it that way. Because a lot of these teachers have some of these issues that COVID affects, you know, cancer, pregnancy, obesity, diabetes, sickle cell. There are a lot of things that the teachers don't have a choice about. I mean, the students do, but the teachers don't. And with this plan that you're proposing, which I think it has a lot of merits for the kids, it will not allow any teachers to be virtual totally. So this plan does mean that everybody will be back in the classroom, no matter their medical condition. So, you know, I'm concerned about that. But otherwise, I love the fact that everybody's going to get all the classes they want. It's great. You know, I think it's good for the kids, although I know digital teaching is different than in-person teaching. So I am kind of wondering how a teacher's going to do both at the same time. Our teachers are pretty amazing. I know they can do lots of things, but that seems like a little stretch to me. But, you know, the main thing I really am trying to emphasize here is that parents need to understand how our teachers feel. And, you know, we need some help. So I'll stop for now. I do want to talk, let me just go ahead and mention about the calendar. Today, Florida High enacted a calendar that starts them out digitally, but puts off brick and mortar the 31st. I would certainly like to see us consider that. And then, I'll just go ahead and finish. I really would like our employees to clearly understand what the procedures are if they want to apply for leave, or if they want to document that they have these underlying health conditions that I mentioned, and be able to ask for accommodations. We have a process. I don't think everybody knows about it. So I would ask you, Superintendent, to make sure that teachers understand, and all employees, what the rules are for accommodations and what the rules are if they want to take leave. Okay, I think I've said probably enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Hang on, Mr. Jones, 1 second. I just want to address what the last thing you said about making sure that our teachers understand the rules and how they would apply for an accommodation, or what happens if they're out of sick leave. You know, all those are exactly the things I was talking about when I mentioned the analogy of the caution lights and the red lights and the green lights, and what are the rules of the road when we go back. I'm not going to say if, because I'm remaining hopeful and prayerful that we'll have a vaccine before too terribly long and things will get back to normal. But when we go back, what are the rules of engagement for the teachers, for the parents? You know, what happens when somebody in the classroom is tested positive? How are the parents notified? What happens if a teacher has a needs an accommodation? So I think that's the clarity that I was referring to that will help increase confidence among all of our stakeholder groups, both teachers, parents, students, and staff. Mr. Jones.
Yes, ma'am. One of the reasons why I think it is so important that we have engagement from everyone involved, to include our parents, right, is because what we find ourselves dealing with is a matter that is beyond the control of our local government. Persons in high places have made a decision that makes it impossible for us to be flexible. If the choice were mine to make, Madam Chair, we'd all be virtual until that time came where we felt confident to return to school en masse. But the reality of the matter is that the persons who sit in high places, the Bible calls it wickedness in high places, have forced our hand as a school district, because they'll withhold our funding if we do not return to brick and mortar. I would love to see us go to an all virtual option, because to be quite frank with you, Madam Chair and colleagues, the inevitability of someone becoming infected is real. We've seen whenever we have reopened in our society in any way, there has been infection, and the infection numbers go up. So we can imagine that when our students and our teachers return to brick and mortar settings, the inevitability of infection is real. So that is why it's incumbent upon the entire community, because we can't not have school. We can't just go to a digital platform, because of the governor and the commissioner of education will not fund our classrooms, will not fund our district. So we have to drive down density to do our best to mitigate safety. So that's why I call upon the angels of all of our nature, that we all play a part in this and deal with a situation that is genuinely beyond our control. Furthermore, I'm sensitive to the plight of staff, bus drivers, cafeteria workers. If we go to an all virtual platform, those persons would more than likely no longer be able to be hired. The lion's share of them live in District 3. So that's why density is the key to our successful opening in brick and mortar. The fewer children that we have to have in our classrooms, and then we can find ways. Mrs. McAllister is extremely creative. We'll find ways to repurpose those persons who are already engaged. We can give our children box lunches so we can keep our cafeteria workers involved. We can use our bus drivers not only to pick up children, but to deliver food to those persons who are being served in digital platforms, who will require those meals. But it requires time to come up with these solutions. And that is what I'm interested in seeing. Because otherwise, we also know, and this is where our area of expertise comes in. We are educators, right? We are a district devoted to instruction. We also know that the governor's edict also requires that if a school is infected, that it may have to close for as long as 4 days. Imagine that interruption in instruction. Teachers count on momentum to provide instruction, the continuity of experiences, right? Well, if we find ourselves across the expanse of our district, closing down and shutting down and re-sanitizing and disinfecting, how do children learn with those types of circumstances? And you can best believe that those persons I describe as wickedness in high places will test our children come the spring, regardless of what other interruptions this instruction may have to encounter. So I want everybody to understand that it's going to take everybody in our community. We may have to enlist our churches, many of whom are who are empty during the week and have fellowship halls, right? We may need to rely upon them, but we've got to allow the ingenuity of the district. I always talk about the genius of the district so that we can enlist other community stakeholders to be a part of that solution. We cannot make that entirely the responsibility of this board and the superintendent to make certain that we're able to meet the needs of the least of our community, our littlest ones, our littlest citizens, right? Without everybody providing some context by which they can be engaged. And that's what our community is going to rely upon us to do. But we're going to need the community to be engaged as well. We've got to bring down density so that when our children travel on school buses won't be as crowded. Classrooms will not be as crowded. And that we'll be able to do our best to mitigate unsafe circumstances. But it's going to require more than any decision that we make. Our hands are tied. We are dealt with an inevitable hand that we must play. But it's going to require more than just the school board, more than just the superintendent. It's going to require our entire community to weigh in so that we can make certain that we're able to ensure the safety of our teachers, our staff, and our students, and be able to keep our workforce engaged in such a way, whether purposefully or in repurposed activities, to make certain that we're able to serve our children.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I would just get back to the idea that we may not all agree on the best way to do this. And the reason for that is that we are all, I would venture to say that the reason every single one of us ever ran for this office is because we are deeply passionate and we are problem solvers. And we solve problems every day and we know how to do it. And this is a problem that has stumped the world and we are desperately trying to fix it. And so even if there was no edict from the governor, there are a number of I'm telling you, I spent the better part of the last 2 days answering emails from my constituents who want school to reopen, period. So I don't know that even if we didn't have that from on high, as you put it, that we wouldn't still be having a debate about how can we make this work for our community. We have one of the most, supposedly we have the highest education level of any county in the state, maybe the country. I've heard from countless people with great ideas. There is more than one way for us to figure this out. And it doesn't have to be divisive. It doesn't have to be, you know, my way or the highway. We have to work together to get to where we can be. I really, really worry. I'm telling you, and I asked permission to share this. My son, when he was younger, struggled with, especially in high school, really struggled with depression. He is an extrovert. He needs to be around his people. He is a sport management major. He came back to FSU because he bleeds garnet and gold, and guess what? There are no sports. And, or at least there don't appear to be today, maybe tomorrow. But the point is, I worry about our kids who really need that kind of interaction. There are kids in our, and we know this, you know this, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We've talked about this a lot. We have children that are in abusive households that desperately need school to be their safe place to go. So back to the idea that for those families where distance learning is possible, if they could help us reduce the density to make it safer for everyone, I think that's a fair request for them to consider. But they know their kids better than we do. And if they have a kid that is really, really struggling and desperately needs to be with teachers and peers, then that's another situation. I would also remind us too that hopefully we're only talking about maybe a quarter, maybe a semester before hopefully things get better. So we've made it already. I can't believe it's been 6 months. It seems like 6 years. But we have to make it a little longer, and we have to find a way to do that together. And I think trying to find a way to keep us on the same page sends the right message to our stakeholders that together we can make this work. Anyone
Madam
else?
Chair, if I may, and I think parents, after hearing this revision to our plan and the merging of programs, will consider what you guys said, because they will know they're going to get real-time instruction during the following their school day as normal. The array of all of their courses are in play. So that was one of the things maybe holding kids back or forcing them to come. They're having to make that decision where I can't get this class, or I can't get that class, or I don't get the daily interaction with teachers. And Ms. Wood, to your point about the teachers, will it be a challenge for our teachers? Yes, but I know that they are very innovative and they are very creative. And one thing that we did, remember, we reduced the number of classes per day from 6 to 3 in secondary. We're going to reduce the elementary classes per day from 4 to 2, so they'll have more time. And yes, they can shift back and forth. But I never underestimate a teacher. They can do this. I have the utmost faith and confidence they do. I think it allows for so many things. If a kid has to quarantine, no big deal. They go home, they click into Zoom like we're doing now, and they're in the class at 8:30 in the morning. If they're now, once the quarantine's over, boom, they're back in. If the whole class say we come back in and something happens and then we go home, we all go home. So it's already locked in place, and all those courses are built in. Again, you can tell I'm happy, I'm excited. We can shoot holes in any plan all day long. We can. And Ms. Rasmussen, to your point, I'd love it if we all agreed on everything, but we're not. And I think sometimes because we are so passionate about our beliefs and what's best, and also taking into consideration all of our stakeholders, sometimes that passion comes across as anger or frustration, there's some frustration with all this because we want to get it right. We want to get it right. But if we don't open, we don't even try, right? And so where I am is if we don't open. So and I'll finish on this because as I said, Pat Weaver told me to be still. I want to be still. I want to hear from the health experts. I want to hear from the task force. And then a week from tonight, we'll continue this discussion.
Mr. Superintendent, one of the things I think is going to be very, very critical, and we think about the numbers, right, that the teachers and their apprehension. Let's talk openly and honestly about what has been our investment thus far to ensure their safety. Beyond class, we've talked about density. Let's talk about whatever we have done in their classrooms, that when they return to their buildings, What will be the dynamic? What do we do? How will we engage staff to make certain that the place is clean and sanitized? And what are we doing to allay their legitimate fears? I think we need to just look to our teachers and our staff in the face and say, we care about you, and let me tell you what we're doing so that you can feel confident and comfortable to be the best teacher you can be, because we've done this, and the other. And explain that most clearly in forums and in meetings such as this, because otherwise, an angry teacher or a frightened teacher is never a good teacher. And if we can do anything in this time and in these meetings to allay their fears, that is time, and those are words well spent. And that's information that you and your team have.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Mr. John, can I respond to that real quick, and then I'll turn to Mr. Wood. I'm sorry, Ms. Wood. Mr. Jones, one of the things you said about the cleaning and that's another example of one of those turn signals I'm looking for. For example, I think we probably need to look at hiring some sanitation companies to come in. We can't put yet another responsibility on our teachers. They already are we've asked them to do everything from protect our students to a shooter to, they're trying to be an instructor. Now they're going to be the mask police or whatever. Cleaning the room isn't that, and I don't know that we have the capacity within our current workforce to adequately sanitize. That's just one example, but that is the kind of thing what I was trying to say about what are the rules of the road? What have we done to mitigate risk? And that is another example of something that I think we could do, and we can articulate that. Again, I know it may cost money, but we have federal CARES money perhaps to help with that kind of thing. And that's just an example.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. Because there's got to be fiscal impacts on us living in a COVID era.
Right.
And I don't know even if the budget that is being presented to us, I know they said we haven't taken into account the CARES Act, but then think about this. We've now got assistant superintendents and directors who already have their already existing responsibilities, who are doing a whole lot of COVID stuff, right? I can imagine that the superintendent will be making a recommendation to us to create an office or an assistant superintendent who is fully staffed with persons who will deal with issues relative to COVID. How we communicate infection? How do we communicate to staff? How do we do the tracing and all? Because there's got to ensure, and those are the types of conversations that I know teachers and parents want to hear. And I think we need to start having that conversation most clearly and articulating it most clearly. And because the leadership, the dog wags the tail doesn't wag the dog. And this site-based leadership is good and well under ordinary circumstances, particularly with instruction. But for the issues of being COVID ready and COVID safe, that's district responsibility altogether. And I think we need to be talking more clearly about what that plan is, particularly to all constituencies, but to the stakeholder who right now expresses great fears, Ms. Woods described, and that's our teachers.
Madam Chair.
This way.
So to that point, I think one of the frustrations from teachers is being told rather than being asked. And for all those, I would say almost 75% of the teachers who said they are worried about coming back for one reason or another, we need to ask them specifically, what would make you less worried? What do we need to do and provide? I've mentioned a bunch of times things that are just small, like microphones and N95 masks for the teachers so they have two-way protection. And they may not want those. I don't know, but we need to ask. The other thing is, the really big thing is class size. And just looking at those numbers, comparing, the number of people who said they want brick and mortar and the number of teachers who are worried, I'm worried that a lot of teachers, when they find out everyone's, all teachers will be at school and they're going to make the decision to take a leave, class size is going to increase. And so if that's the case, we need to be honest with parents about it. But if we could make some assurances about class size and say, well, no matter how the pendulum swings, if one teacher gets a lot of digital people, so they can have 6 in their classroom, but another teacher doesn't, and they end up with 22, then that's not equitable. And so some assurances about class size. Now, I understand that's an expensive thing, and what it's going to require is for more people to choose digital that haven't chosen it yet. So, Superintendent, maybe we can take another pulse of the parents. They've had to fill in a survey, and as you know, many of them reserve their right to have classroom brick and mortar because that's the way the survey was written. If you couldn't go one way, you couldn't go back to brick and mortar if you chose digital, but you could go the other way. So many people, I think, chose brick and mortar to keep their options open. Perhaps we can re-survey the parents with this new option and see how many are willing to keep their children home, so that we can make it safer for our staff and the folks who just have no other choice. They're single parents and they have no one to leave their child with. Those are real problems that I really know we all appreciate. The youngest children, the K through 2 students who don't do well with digital unless they've got an adult right there to help them. If we could talk about the golden rule a lot and say, if you can keep your child home, please do, to help other people, I think people would respond to that.
Chair.
Ms. Strickland.
Maybe I might just chime in. Just lots of good thoughts tonight. I think all conversation is good conversation. There's lots of things that can bubble up and surface. And, one of the things in all the questions, and I have questions too, I think we all do. And the fact that we meet every other week now, once a week, will give us more time to have our questions answered. But also, the point Ms. Wood made about, what if one class has only 8 in the room and another class has 22 because more kids chose digital. There's an element of faith here that we have to have in our people at the district and at our school site administrators, that they're not going to let that happen. They're working feverishly behind the scenes to make those classes equitable and to make them, I would dare say, we're not going to see that situation, that they're going to manage those classroom sizes. And as we see, hopefully with our urging, as we see more people opt out and say, okay, for the good of the cause, I'm going to keep my child home temporarily. This is temporary. We hope for just the semester. But as we see our class size go down, we have some great principals, wonderful, incredible, innovative, unbelievable principals and administrators at our schools that are implementing procedures, and it's hard to discuss every single one of them. So what does the band class look like? What does chorus 2 look like? What does kindergarten, at this school look like? What does 3rd grade at that school look like? That we have to have a little bit of faith in the good people at the district and in our superintendent that they're doing these things. I think our questions will be answered as things unfold. I was looking really forward to presentations tonight, and I'm really disappointed that's not going to happen, but I understand this was a budget meeting, and so we can't, I guess, kind of throw that in there, but I wish we could. I don't like all the constraints we're under because it keeps us from getting the information that we need in a timely manner. But again, I just want to urge us to have a lot of faith in the people that work in the district and in our school site administrators, that they're doing these things, they're working on these things.
Yeah, somebody today was talking to me and they compared it. They are asking, how are you? What if you don't have enough teachers? You have more students. And they said that's the Rubik's cube. This is a puzzle, and and surveys. I just have to speak to this. We've all worked in academics. We understand survey bias. We understand the way the questions are written. We understand, I would suggest if we do any further surveys, we may want to enlist the help of some of our higher ed friends who are highly skilled at this. Okay, anybody else? So.
Well, can I say this?
Yes, sir.
And I know I do sometimes wax on a bit, but I do want to correct the superintendent in that I'm passionate, and my comments have been passionate tonight because I am mad. I am very, very upset. And I see this moment that we find ourselves in, and I think about the works and the words of Toni Morrison, the great Nobel laureate, who would write about what we describe as the master's narrative. And although the master's narrative certainly sounds like it's an issue of race, but the master's narrative is far more sinister and diabolical than that. The master's narrative is patrician, and that rich, old people think that they have the right to make decisions on behalf of everyone else. That master's narrative is racist, it is classist, it is misogynistic, it is anti-family, it is selfish, and it is sinister in nature. We find ourselves having to have this type of conversation beyond our local control, but people would dare withhold money from a school district that only wants to make decisions in the best interest of its students and teachers, and requires and obligates them to do it their way or no way at all. And so, yeah, I'm passionate, but I am mad because I think we as a community have purposely eschewed such demagoguery because we chose to reach out to our neighbors, ask our neighbors, and we looked across the beauty and the expanse and the expertise that our neighbors had to afford us, and we brought our neighbors together to help to inform this process, to give us some insight about how we could make certain that all of our children and all of our teachers and all of our staff and our community at large would be well served. And for all of our great effort to have someone to tell us the decision is not entirely yours to make about whether or not we open schools or make choices in the best interests of our children. And that angers me beyond description. And that is why I think it is important that we as a district do our part to make certain that we eschew such demagoguery and that we communicate most clearly, most plainly to our people and remind them that we are their neighbors, that we live next door to them. They are our friends. They are our colleagues, and that we care about them and that we're doing everything to allay any fears that they have, whether they are parents, staff, or teachers, and that we will not in any way evidence that master's narrative in Leon County, but instead that we would harness, like Lincoln said, the angels of our nature, because we are our brother's keeper and we do care about our children. But yeah, I'm passionate, but I'm still mad. And that's why I've said what I've had to say. And I'm grateful to work with colleagues like you who share in my passion and who, although you might not say it, I'm sure you all are mad too, that the decision is not entirely ours. This is what we describe in church. I haven't been in church in 6 months now, but I still know what the word says. And it talks about wickedness in high places. And that's what this is. I just had to say it.
Okay, so what I'm going to say is next week, I'm going to put a proposal that we ask for to be able to have a waiver from this. We may not be granted it, but would at least make a statement that we want local control. And so that will be before you to decide on as a board next week. The other thing I just wanted to comment to Ms. Striplin's point, having been a principal, and, you know, I completely agree with you that we have really smart, talented people at our schools that will do absolutely the best thing they can do for our children. But I do think it's important to have some standards. That's back to Ms. Rasmussen's red light, green light, blinkers thing. If we say, I've been saying this for quite a while, we have some standards about what is the class size, what is the COVID capacity of a classroom? And, are we going to say that we're not going to allow a certain number of children in a classroom that can't house that many children without being very close together. I mean, that is one of the big things from the CDC. It says, you know, it does say 6 feet and a mask. Other things like, how are we going to enforce the mask rules? Brought that up a number of times. You know, if we're going to have a rule like that, and that is like a safety and health rule, it's got to be strictly enforced. And people who aren't willing to go by it need to go home and go virtual. And I think that has to be in writing, and parents have to sign off on it, because that is a health and safety matter that is really important. And some people don't believe in masks, so, you know, their children may not either. And I just would hate to, and I think teachers are scared about having to enforce something like that and argue. Believe me, it's hard to get a cell phone out of a kid's hand, you know, when the rules are very clear. So, you know, spelling all these things out, I think is security for everybody. So.
Well, back to my analogy. We have people that enforce speed limits. And if you run a red light, there's a fine. I mean, I don't know all the answers, but I think that's exactly what I was trying to say, is people need to understand the rules of the road. And we've got to do a better job of articulating and putting that together in a way that is easy to understand for everybody involved, so that we know how to, what the rules are. So, all right. Given that this was a budget meeting, I would, I think not tonight perhaps, but I am interested to know what the plans are with regard to the budget and the CARES Act, specifically about what kind of funding we are going to be able to offer to add those additional protections that we need in light of COVID and didn't need last year. Just throwing that out there. And I know at my house, I've been kicked off of internet a couple of times. We're experiencing a pretty significant thunderstorm out here. So I'm probably about to be adios, but are we?
One more thing, ma'am. One more thing, madam. I think we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge the young man at Fort Braden. I know we do not pray in our context, but I would like for us to just take a moment in this very public context to think of him and his family and other people who have been affected by this. That we might be on one accord and of a singular mind, that we don't want this to befall anyone, none of our teachers, none of our students, none of our staff, but that we would think of Jordan Bird for just a moment before we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and God bless him and his family. I'm sorry that we had technical issues at the beginning of the meeting that didn't lend themselves to having that moment of silence, but I absolutely agree, and ask our community for your prayers. Pray for us for discernment and wisdom. If you're not a praying person, positive thoughts. Send us your ideas. Excuse me. I think this is a work in progress. Even what the superintendent said tonight. Maybe by tomorrow he'll hear from a bunch of teachers about why that might not work, but maybe we can tweak it this way or tweak it that way. Again, a work in progress. We need time, we need grace, we need patience. And we need to stick together because of those things we do agree on, which is we don't want anything bad to happen to our staff or our families or our children, and we want our children to be engaged and educated in a safe and healthy way. And I think with that,
Madam,
I'm sorry, Ms. Williams has something I was going to say.
I just want to, I'm not sure that it's clearly articulated, but the persons to be heard, all comments received as of the time. Can you hear me? You can't hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, say it.
Okay. All public comment that was received as of the 6 o'clock hour has been uploaded and is attached under the persons to be heard tab for this meeting. They've also all been provided to board members, and they will be attached to the minutes of this meeting once those minutes are prepared. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And that's a good reminder. I know I personally, I can't remember if I said this earlier or not. I spent the last 48 hours responding to emails. I'm trying to get through them all. Thank you to the members of our community who are taking the time to pay attention and invest in helping us think through this very, very difficult, very complicated, very complex set of circumstances. It is not easy. And, you know, a lot of times we think, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. Well, what I've learned, and somebody taught this to me the first time I ran for office and I ended up on the school board, they said, well, where you sit is where you stand. And then what they meant by that is, what I have learned over time is that usually there is a reason. What seems so obvious to most people, there's probably a law or a rule or a financial commitment, that there's something that keeps us from doing whatever it is that seems like such an honest, such an obvious answer. So we are, we're grateful that you've honored us and entrusted us with working our way through these very complicated issues. I'm grateful to our staff and our the people of the district, all of our school principals who are tirelessly trying to figure out how to put together a puzzle of a schedule with only half the information because it's such a moving target. We don't know. What the superintendent has just recommended tonight may or may not end up being exactly where we are next week. So just work with us. Let us work through it. Trust the process. And we'll get there. We will. And thank you, Mr. Jones, for acknowledging that precious family. And just pray for all of us that we will find a way to get through this in a way that is both honoring and respectful of human life and the people that we love in our community.
I just add, right before the meeting start, Mrs. Bowen got really sad news of a close family member who died, and if we could just keep her in our prayers as well.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Yes. Hearts and love to Ms. Bowen and her family. Mr. Superintendent, anything else for the good of the order?
No, ma'am.
All right, very good. So Ms. Striplin moves we rise, and we'll see you next week at the Aquilina Howell Center. If you want to come and make a presentation, public comments, people are authorized to come and speak for 3 minutes each. And trust me, we will read all the emails, all the things that have been submitted. I'll tell you just as an overview, last week we had a lot of teachers weighing in on concerns and fears about going back to school. This week,
Madam Chair, I think it's frozen.
Well, I think she was going to say this week we obviously heard from hundreds of parents who want their children to return to school, and I personally know that I've read all of them. So we've heard from our constituents. We'll have a task force meeting Thursday morning at 10, and then we'll reconvene next Tuesday.
Superintendent, I think it would be good to share those those letters with our task force, as well as, hopefully tonight, also the numbers that you received from the teachers, alongside on a spreadsheet with the numbers that of people who have requested to go, all the data they can get, I think will help them be more informed. Also, I hope that we will continue the process of allowing people to submit their comments in writing under persons to be heard and reflected in our minutes, even as we go back to brick and mortar, because many people, I think it's just a great thing because we get to hear from more people. and also puts them in the record without them having to come out and necessarily going into an environment they might feel not as safe about. And so I believe we also have our last, from what I heard today, our last Zoom workshop, which will be next Monday. Is that correct? If that is correct, I would ask that it be live streamed. I think the interest out there is great, and I want them to hear every word we say. So my request is that since we have the technology to be able to do that we live stream our workshop as well as the board meeting.
I was under the Hello, I was under the impression that that persons had the option to return or do Zoom. Is that not accurate?
Yes, so from this point forward, your meetings, you will have the option to either have them in person, virtually, or a combination. We've always had that ability under the governor's executive order, okay? So next week's meeting will be in a physical location. The meeting on Tuesday will be in a physical location, which will enable members of the public to come and be heard. Board members, to the extent you need to appear via Zoom, for whatever reason, you will be able to appear via Zoom. If you're going to come and appear in person, you can appear in person. And we will be able to maintain that as long as the governor continues to have the executive order in effect. So there will be that option for one, A, B, or C, which is basically a combination of A and B.
And we've publicly noticed the task force meeting so that board members can participate or be present.
That I'm going to defer to Dr. Gale.
Yes, that meeting notification was sent out last week. Board members, I'll resend it to you if just to make sure you have it.
Okay. Thank you.
He said that we could participate. I didn't think we were allowed to participate, just attend.
I think
Right.
that's what's meant.
That's what I meant by attend.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
I think Ms. Rasmussen made a motion and a second from Ms. Striplin, or vice versa, right?
Ms. Striplin moved.
All right.
Return.
Thank you.
Good night.